You ready? We'd like to welcome everyone tonight to our work session here on Tuesday, January 24th, and we will start our work session, we'll hold our work session to discuss a legislative update, and we'll turn the time over to our city manager, Gary Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. We are just getting started with the fun this legislative session. And, there are a number of us that are involved to different degrees with what's happening at the state. I think Bountiful's very, very well represented at the things that happen at the Capitol. And so for anybody who is involved in some of these issues, if you want to jump in and add any detail, whether that's you, Mayor, or Kate, or Ed, or anyone else that is following along.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just remembered. Does anyone know if Richard's planning to participate in this discussion? Do you have a way of knowing if he would?
He can't yet. We don't have a resolution.
Okay, we haven't passed the ordinance. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, that's right. Thank you. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Good question. So I want to take a minute and highlight some of the issues that are on our radar right now for the council. Let you ask any questions or provide a position on any of these things that you see fit. If there is differing opinion from the way we're representing Bountiful City, it'd be good to know. And a lot of this will be kind of high level, just as an idea of what's out there and being discussed. I want to start with accessory dwelling units. There is proposed legislation this year, again on accessory dwelling units. I haven't seen anything that's been formally proposed yet, but the concepts that are being discussed involve whether or not and the internal ADU standards and I should say the preemption of local ordinances should also apply to above garage ADUs, whether they be attached or unattached. There's questions about and ideas about preempting local exterior standards for ADUs, whether that be a requirement that the ADU look like the rest of the home, or you have a separate entrance. Some of those things are being considered as to be preempted from local government. There's also, in one of the proposals, there was an idea of removing the ability to require an extra parking space, which of course was a big subject of concern. Probably the number one subject of concern for cities, frankly, has to do with parking. The idea of having, not being able to regulate ADUs over unattached garages is also of concern. We shared some feedback to those that were considering this bill because, as we know, garages have different setbacks than homes do, and if you're now putting a second story on a garage that is not subject to local land use, that can create big issues with neighbors. So we're with the league, we're kind of paying attention to where that one's going. It's all in the name of affordable housing, by the way, is again what is the motivating factor, the spoken motivating factor behind some of these changes. There are a few public safety related bills that we're keeping an eye on. One has to do with towing. I think you're all aware of our the program that we participate with a vendor who calls our rather than our own dispatchers having to find a tow company on a rotation, and if they need a tow, we have a vendor who automatically does that, passes that fee along to the individual being towed. It's saved a huge amount of administrative hassle from our dispatchers, and also has provided some great reporting as to where the tows are taking place, whether or not the tow companies are actually taking the vehicles to county holding facilities or not. It's provided a level of accountability that we've appreciated. Kate and the chief have both been involved in conversations, multiple conversations, continuing multiple conversations with some legislation that would hopefully codify some of this. The good news is the Department of Public Safety has been in a pilot program for 3 months now, or 6 months. Is it a 6-month program? They're 3 months in?
It's a year-long pilot program that the Highway Patrol is in, and they've completed just over 6 months. And I think their positive impacts and results mirror what the city has been seeing in terms of increased efficiencies and those types of things. So the Highway Patrol wanted to move forward with changes in state code that enable this type of a program. Just like Bountiful's been doing kind of a similar pilot-ish using the regulatory sandbox opportunity.
Yeah, we really like it. It's been really valuable. The state has really liked it. There's some pushback from the towing companies that Kate is, in particular, is working with the sponsor, Senator Harper, to work through. And I think the outcome is pending, so, but generally headed in a positive direction. Is that fair to say, Kate and Chief?
Yeah, the bill actually moved out of committee with the changes that would be beneficial this afternoon. I was just telling the chief that the towers might still want a few more changes.
Okay.
The
So-
towing community is an interesting one, just as a update to the committee here. Yeah.
So we're keeping our eye on that one. And a couple of other public safety retirement ones. Public safety retirement continues to be a subject of debate. I think for those that maybe are not aware, the state of Utah changed retirement systems a number of years ago, probably 12 years ago now, 13 years ago, because it wasn't penciling after the Great Recession, and they reduced the benefit for new hires, including public safety officers. And there's a continuing debate about whether or not that, if they increase the retirement benefit, that will help with retention and recruitment. I think opinions are divided on that. But there's a proposal right now that would, I think, have a fiscal impact on cities of around, I think the number was $34 million, to reduce the number of years by which a police officer could retire and increase the contribution for them. It's a pretty big fiscal note. I think it's debatable whether or not that would actually entice officers to stay longer in the profession, and whether or not it's a recruiting tool. I think there might be other solutions out there, but that's one that we're paying pretty close attention to. There are two other interesting public safety related bills. One is HB 59 by Representative Wilcox called First Responder Mental Health Amendments. Last year, a bill went into effect that required public safety agencies to provide mental health services for police officers and for retirees. This would extend that benefit to the spouses of retirees. I think there's a question about how long that benefit goes on and if it's a lifetime benefit or not. So we're looking at that. One that has maybe more of an immediate impact on cities is by the same Representative Wilcox, House Bill 61, School Safety Requirements. It does a few things. The first thing that it does is it creates a state safety chief position. This is somebody who would be at the state level kind of responsible for considering school safety issues, and that a task force would be created. It would be, I believe, created under the Department of Public Safety. But it would also require, this bill would require local public safety to have school resource officers in every secondary school. Right now there in Davis County, we have school resource officers in every high school. The school district does not pay the full cost of that. They pay about half, Chief, of the cost. The city picks up the other half of the cost for that full-time officer who during the school year is in the school or dealing with school issues as long as school's in, and also involved with after-hours events and things like that. We get the benefit of that position in the months that school's not involved. They get to put back into our rotation for patrol and traffic enforcement, which is why you may recall during the summer when we had our SROs no longer at the school, we were able to do a lot more traffic enforcement, pedestrian in particular, and had some really good success with that. But this bill would require that SROs be placed in every junior high as well, not just the school districts, but that would include charter schools as well, whether or not they want them, which was an issue that was raised at Legislative Policy Committee, that there's some charter schools who don't necessarily want a school resource officer on site. The other challenging thing about it is that it says that school districts may share in the cost with this, but if they choose not to, then we have to pick up the whole tab. Now, in Bountiful's case, we already have police officers who are assigned to all of our schools, but they are not there 24/7. Well, nobody's there 24/7, but they're not there. They're not assigned permanently to the school. This would have a big fiscal impact for all police agencies in the state. There's no offsetting funding for this, and so we're obviously concerned about that.
Could I ask a question regarding that? In the context of the legislation for school choice or vouchers, that is, just is one Senate vote away from passing, as far as I understand. Would this also apply to private schools that would be in the city's boundaries? Because it kind of stands to follow that if the voucher bill passes, there will be an increase in private schools. Would we then also be accountable to have school SROs in private schools?
So I don't know the answer to that. My understanding, based on the way it was described to us in legislative policy, is this would be public schools, which includes charter schools. It would not extend to private schools. And part of that is because a private school like Liberty Hills Academy on Main Street isn't limited to just a secondary or a high school. They have students that are from elementary through graduation age. So I don't think it would, but I don't know. And it's very much in flux, but that's going to have a big fiscal note on it. And if it passes, it'll definitely be problematic. Now, right now, the bill's drafted that it says it can be a part-time officer or a full-time officer. I don't know if that means a part-time officer who's spending full-time hours at the school, or if it's an officer who spends part of their time at a school. If that's the case, then we're already covered. We're already doing that, but that one worries me. That will be challenging to pay for. The state's also proposing some tax cuts. The state has a surplus, but as we like to remind them, local governments don't have surpluses. And so if they're cutting revenue sources, they should be cautious not to impact local government to the same degree they want to impact the state. One of the proposals that I don't think has a lot of traction yet, but has been suggested, is cutting this state sales tax on food. It already is a reduced rate. The state sales tax rate is 4.85%, but the state sales tax on groceries is 1.75%. A proposal is to remove all sales tax, that remaining state portion, and all of the local portions off of groceries. That would have a huge fiscal impact on the city if that was the case. And so we're obviously, as a league and a city, is very concerned about that.
Can I just chime in? I remember seeing, I think it was Cam's point that he said the state has a surplus, but cities don't. I just think that it's good. I'm glad that they're reminding the state that some of these things they may think, oh, we can cut and it'll be great, but it really will affect us. So I'm glad they're pushing that message.
Well, one of the challenges, right, with the legislature, and Todd Weiler said it well, is, you know, in his opinion, one of the great things about a legislature like this is that any legislator can propose a bill, and a bad thing about a legislature is any legislator can propose a bill. And they don't necessarily talk to each other. And so we'll see, you know, 30, 40 bills that either increase our expenses or decrease our revenues, and they don't necessarily all know that that's happening. They don't coordinate this stuff as nearly as well as one might think. Kate, you were going to say something?
I was just explaining to a client earlier today that, several legislators have introduced bills, the exact same topic, the exact same problem, but 4 different ways to solve it. So 4 different bills addressing the same thing. They haven't coordinated them. Each have different pros and cons. The legislative process is meant to probably help pick the best one and, you know, massage it through the process, but it can be really unwieldy, especially early in the session like we've currently got, to have, 104 different ideas on the same problems. Just, the law enforcement category of bills this year is quite big, and a lot of it is, for instance, I think there are probably like 10 different ideas about how to handle the sex offender registry. It's just one registry, but how we handle it 10 different ways. And so that all gets whittled out, mostly coordinated by the end, but it's really unwieldy right now in the early days of the session.
And yeah, with that retirement, public safety retirement, for example, there are 3 different proposals, 2 by one representative, a third by this third representative, and not many people know what's in each of them. Nobody's coalesced around a single idea, let alone whether or not that idea is good. And sometimes that conversation goes all the way to the end of the session. But unfortunately, we have to pay attention to all of them and point out sometimes that they're conflicting ideas, and that while the legislature may think that this one little impact, for example, Representative Wilcox might not think that, asking cities to pay for an additional SRO in each junior high is a big deal. But when you combine that with the 20 or 30 other ideas that are going to increase our costs, as well as the other bills that are going to do things like increase our sales tax diversion towards homelessness, it adds up pretty quickly.
So just one more follow-up question on the tax cut. Possible legislation coming down the pike there. You mentioned the 1.75% state sales tax on food or on groceries. Is the city percentage, is that, or municipal, is that 1%?
It is, yeah.
And so these proposals, are they proposing cutting all, like they would mandate a cut at the state level, the city level, just across the board?
So there's, like, again, multiple proposals, but one of which is to take food out of the sales tax base for all taxes. So it would affect local, state, county taxes. I don't think that has as much support right now as say, a reduction to the income tax. That's probably the number one most looked at tax cut right now that's being considered in the, I think, governor's budget and by leadership. So I don't want to necessarily push a panic button, but anytime they talk about sales tax on food, we have to remind people that how important of a stabilizer that is in our sales tax base. It's incredibly important for our sales tax stabilization. So.
Just one other quick question regarding the public safety retirement legislation. What is the league's position on that? Has the league stated a position on the Utah League of Cities and Towns? Have they stated a position on this retirement legislation?
So the league's position on this particular bill right now is simply to work with the sponsor. It has not taken an official oppose or support position. They have a general position about about retirement bills is that they ought to apply to everyone equally, and that unfunded mandates are unwelcome, that if the state's going to change the retirement system but not provide a way to help pay for that, that it puts a burden on cities. And so I think the default position is generally to oppose these without a very good reason.
So we just have a few last minutes. If you want to wrap up any last things that you think would be good for us to know.
Yeah, just last one is maybe in the land use arena. As we all know, there's a lot of talk about affordable housing and preemption of local zoning, and so far there's nothing that has out there that's really surprising us, which is good news. There are two areas where we're going to see legislation for sure. One has to do with our moderate income housing requirements, HB 462, that tonight is on your agenda to approve that amendment, which really is a placeholder to meet state requirements until we get through with our general plan in about 6 months, when we'll have you re-adopt it again. But they're talking about, they're really want to hold cities' feet to the fire, what they call bad actor cities who aren't necessarily, missing crossing a T or dotting an I, but are looking at what the state's trying to do and purposely saying, we're not going to go along with this. We're not interested in providing, moderate income housing, or we only want, single, 1 acre single family lots in our town. The state's pretty interested in punishing bad actors. So there's going to be, this legislative session, penalties introduced in all likelihood for cities who are not playing along. That's not necessarily a bad thing, as far as it's hard to justify cities that simply don't want to have good land use practices. But it is concerning in the sense that that'll probably be the punishment for all. Anytime the legislature wants to point out that we're bad actors, it'll probably fall into some category of this. It's a little bit like the saying of the dad who looks at his son and says, go get something that I can beat you with. They're asking us to find the tool to beat us with, not only on this issue, but with any issues they might find in the future that they don't like. So we're watching that one closely.
Thank you for that recap. Do you have anything to add, Councilwoman Bradshaw?
The other one that I think we may be briefed on at a future meeting would just be the conversion from PIDs to DIDs to LIDs. The name has evolved to limited infrastructure districts, but the idea is basically still the same. It's one we've discussed before that I personally find concerning. And I think we haven't seen bill language yet, but it looks like Representative Dunnigan will be the bill sponsor, and a lot of negotiations still taking place on that one, but it would be one to keep an eye on, and I expect there'll be an update next meeting on it.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate Councilwoman Bradshaw and Gary, our city manager, Gary Hill, for your work in helping represent us well at the legislature and keeping us in the loop. So thank you so much for that update. We'll just take a quick break and come back for a regular meeting.